What town is this?
Hudson.
Hudson. Okay. We all set? Okay. It is Wednesday, July 16th, 2008. My name is Steve Brown. I'm with the Cantigny 1st Division Oral History Project. We are in Hudson, Ohio today with Mr. Dave Hack. Mr. Hack, can you spell your last name for us, please?
H-A-C-K.
And you served in the 1st Division during the Vietnam era, is that correct?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Why don't you tell us a little bit, where did you grow up?
I was raised in Louisville, Kentucky.
And how did you enter the service?
I started out with the United States Coast Guard in 1957 until 1961.
And that was right out of high school?
Exactly, yes, sir.
What was high school like for you?
It was a lot of fun. I ran track, I played football, did the normal things, and I enjoyed it.
Were you married when you joined the Coast Guard?
I was not.
Okay. Why the Coast Guard?
I thought that the Coast Guard was challenging, and there's an awful lot said about the Coast Guard, and I just thought it would be the thing to go into.
What did you do in the Coast Guard?
Started out as a seaman in the Coast Guard, and I was on a 255-footer white ship. We served from, or sailed, I'm sorry, sailed from Hawaii to Yokosuka, Japan. Then from there, I went over to Loran Station duty, and I was on Wake Island for 16 months. And then from Wake Island, I was in the Coast Guard security at Cape May, New Jersey again. And then I was in the Coast Guard security at St. Louis, Missouri.
So you went from the Coast Guard. When did you enter the Army?
I entered the Army in 1964. I had a 3-year break in service. Went in business for myself for 3 years. Wasn't successful. April Fool's Day, I was walking by an Army recruiter in Phoenix, Arizona, as a matter of fact, and the recruiter says, "Where are you going?" And I says, "Well, just, shopping, walking downtown." He says, "How would you like to join the Army?" I said, "Well, I really hadn't thought about it." And he says, "How would you like to join the Army Rangers?" And I says, "Well, that's pretty appealing." And that's when I joined.
Why was that appealing to you?
There again, the challenge. Yeah. I just felt that going in the Rangers would be a challenge.
Were you married at this time?
In 1964, no, I was not.
Okay. So you're a single guy,
Right.
looking for adventure.
You bet.
So I'm going to join the Rangers.
Yeah, right.
Okay. Where'd they send you?
They sent me to the 1st Ranger Company, Fort Benning, Georgia.
Well, did you do basic before that?
No, I was prior service.
Okay. So
Yeah.
you went straight to Ranger School.
Well, I thought I was going to Ranger School, but I went to the 1st Ranger Company, and when I reported in, they saw that I'd been in the Coast Guard 4 years. The Ranger camp at Eglin Air Force Base needed someone that knew an awful lot about small boats and LCUs and LCVPs in their Ranger training. So they sent me straight to Eglin Air Force Base at the Ranger camp. I think it was Field 5 or Field 7 at that time. And I stayed there 2 years as an instructor, was not Ranger qualified.
Do you have the Ranger patch?
At that time I did, but when I left there I did not.
Okay.
So therefore I was not Ranger qualified. I did not go to school. Each month, after each cycle, I would ask, when am I going to Ranger School? And the first sergeant said, "Let's talk about it next month."
And so there would be a 1-month training cycle for the Rangers as they came in?
Yes, sir.
And you kept saying, "Why not me? Why not me?"
Yeah, send me in, Coach.
Okay. So, and this went on for 2 years?
Yes, sir.
Next month, next month,
Next
month
month.
for 2 years?
Correct, yeah.
Why did it end?
I got a little perturbed, and I sat down one day and I wrote a letter to the President of the United States and President Johnson at the time, and I explained my situation. And about a month later, the first sergeant called me in, and And he says, Hack, he says, did you write to the President of the United States? And I says, well, yes, I did. I want to go to Ranger School. And I said, you guys are busting my chops, you know, but I want to go to Ranger School because you have to have that in your 201 file.
What's a 201 file?
Your records. And he says, well, he says, pack your bags. He says, you're leaving. I said, what? He said, you're leaving. I said, where am I going? He said, you're going to Newfoundland.
Now, what time of year was this?
Winter, dead winter. And I says, oh, man. So, you know, the moral of the story is, you know, ours is not the question why. Ours is a do or die. And I went to Newfoundland for 7 months.
What were you doing in Newfoundland other than freezing?
Just freezing, and it was a security deal where they were closing the base down. McNamara was closing an Air Force base down, so they had a team of Army guys there, just security.
It'd be Secretary McNamara?
That was.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So what did you do there all day?
Not much of anything, just standing around, really.
Okay.
Standing around, going to the NCO club and playing the slot machines. And,
Okay.
And that was it.
Were you married at this time?
At that time I was.
And she didn't get to go along?
No.
Would she have wanted to go along?
I doubt it. Newfoundland wasn't much there. Just a lot of seals and a lot of cold weather.
Okay. So where are you posted after Newfoundland?
I requested to go to Vietnam and received orders to go to Vietnam. And while I was home on leave, my stepfather passed away. And in doing so, they reassigned me as a compassionate reassignment to Louisville, Kentucky at the Nicholas AFI station. It's an old Army hospital during World War II. AFI is Armed Forces Examining Station. And stayed there for 1 year. And then I went to Vietnam.
Okay. Why did you're in Newfoundland,
Yes,
why did you request Vietnam?
Well, there was a couple of things. One is I knew that my stay up there was only going to be 6 or 7 months. I felt that it was my duty to serve my country more than what I was doing at the present time.
Why?
From what I've read and from what I'd heard from other soldiers, that I felt that I would be needed there.
Did you tell your wife you'd requested Vietnam?
I did.
What did she think about that?
She felt at that time that it was my decision and that I was over 21.
Okay. So you're in Louisville at the AFI station. What are you doing there?
We were administering exams to people that were being drafted.
Okay.
And so I did.
Processing draftees?
Processing, correct.
Okay. So they pick you up in Louisville and they ship you off to Vietnam.
Correct.
What's your first impression of Vietnam?
I landed at Cameron Bay, and I thought that I was in Miami, Florida. These guys were walking around wearing Bermuda shorts, sandals, T-shirts, no guns, no noise. And I thought, wow, this is Vietnam. And I was pleasantly surprised.
Okay. What did they do with you the first month or so that you were there, first week?
We didn't stay there a week. We only stayed there a day.
What happened
The
then?
next day, they called everyone out in formation. They started reading off different people's names, and they says, Hack, I see that you had spent 2 years with the 1st Ranger Company. You're going to the Big Red One. And I says, Big Red One? They says, yes, Big Red One.
Did you know anything about the Big Red One?
I knew absolutely nothing about it. Yeah.
Did you learn about the Big Red One after that?
Yes, I did.
Did you learn a little bit about the history of the...
Yes, I did.
How did that happen?
We went into Xeon at the in processing, and I was there for a matter of 3 days. And the indoctrination, they told us all about the 1st Infantry Division and what our mission was in Vietnam, and the history about the Big Red One from World War I all the way up to present. And I was extremely proud to be associated with the 1st Infantry Division.
Okay. What was the date you arrived in Vietnam?
I arrived in Vietnam the 1st of March.
Okay. And how long did you stay?
I was in Vietnam up until Friday the 13th, September 1968.
Okay. You get to the Big Red One.
Yes, sir.
1st Division, and you're in process. What did that involve, aside from learning a little bit about the division?
Most of it was administrative, paperwork.
What did you know about jungle fighting at that point?
Absolutely nothing.
Okay.
Oh, wait a minute, I take that back. Before going to Vietnam, we had a thing at Fort Knox, Kentucky, that I had to go through jungle school. And the jungle school was a couple weeks. It was an indoctrination to Vietnam. And it was quite a bit about villages and search and patrolling and things like that. So before going to Vietnam, yes, I had some training.
Okay. What do they do with you once you get through with your initial in-processing?
There was a first sergeant that came up to me, and he was one of the interviewers. His name was Potter, First Sergeant Potter, and he says, "Sergeant Hack, I see that you had spent some time at an AFI station." And he says, "What we're going to do with you is pull you out of the ranks, and we're going to send you to the headquarters at Lai K, and we would like for you to become a career counselor for the 1st Infantry Division. And do you know anything about it?" And I says, "Well, working at an AFI station for a year, yes. I'm very familiar with it." And they says, "Well, that's your new job."
What did career counseling in the Army entail?
With the 1st Infantry Division?
Yes.
What you do is you get on a helicopter or you get on a track and you go to different units and you re-enlist people in combat. And you have them sign up and re-enlist and extend their time in the armed forces.
So you were working as a recruiter?
You betcha. But
Okay.
my job was in the field. And what I would do, I went to Lai K, and I relieved a guy. His name was Jack Biddix, and Jack was rotating back, and there was a guy named Sergeant Quam and myself, and we were the division reenlistment NCOs, i.e. career counselors, at the 3rd Brigade. And we had an itinerary where we had to go out to different units throughout the 1st Infantry Division. And it was our responsibility to re-enlist individuals so they would stay in the Army. That's a challenge.
I was going to say, is that a rather hard sell?
That was a challenge.
How did you get that done?
I did it. Yeah, I was very successful at it. And what you would do is you would go out and you'd hitch a ride on a Huey. And you'd go
Huey helicopter.
A Huey helicopter, and you'd go into a combat zone, and you'd sit there and you'd talk to these guys about re-enlisting in the Army. And it got a lot of people's attention because some people would say, "Are you nuts?" You know, what am I going to do by reenlisting in the Army? You know, I says, well, these are the things that we can offer you. And I would offer them cross-training, where if this guy's in the infantry and he didn't want to be in the infantry anymore, I could take him out of the infantry and cross-train him and put him in a different field. And that was appealing to an awful lot of people.
Such as, what sorts of fields would they cross-train in?
Administrative, automotive as far as being a mechanic, anything that has to do, well, with not so much of running through the jungle. And that would be appealing to him. Now, on the other side of the coin, there was a lot of guys that we talked to that were in administrative, that were bored stiff, and they didn't want any part of it. And we put them in a combatant position. There's a lot of guys that just wanted to get where the action was. You know, they want to get involved. They want to do something. So we would take them out of their field and send them into a combat position.
What would you say was the biggest motivation for the guys in the combat position to re-enlist?
The biggest motivation was that for a person that was a combatant to cross-train and get into a field that would be beneficial to him when eventually he was discharged from the armed forces. And a lot of these people that re-enlisted at that time were younger individuals. And a lot of guys would take a short discharge and go into a field that he could use as a civilian when his discharge was over.
Were there bonuses in pay or any
The bonuses
other sorts of incentives?
at that time was small. The money was small. It wasn't a lot of money. It isn't the way it is now. You know, today, you know, it's a fortune. But at that time, if a person took a short discharge, he probably could realistically expect maybe $300 to $600. And that then wasn't a lot of money, and it isn't a lot of money today. It really wasn't.
How long would the short discharge last for?
If a guy had enlisted or been drafted, let's say for an example, the guy is a draftee, and he was drafted for 2 years, you could say that he could re-enlist for 3 years, and you would cancel his 2-year commitment and start his 3 years from that day forward. So if he's been in a year, in essence, he would only serve 4 years. And that was appealing to a lot of people. And most of all, the draftee, because if there are a lot of guys that were drafted and they were in the infantry and they were up front and they were a young man and they didn't want any part of that, they didn't want to be drafted from the beginning, that was extremely appealing to them.
It was an opportunity to get out of the combat zone.
Exactly.
Okay. Okay. So you have had, at this point, later on, did you work later on as a recruiter after you got out of Vietnam?
When I left Vietnam, I was in the hospital for a year. And as a patient, USAREC, U.S. Army Recruiting Command, came to the hospital and asked if I wanted to go on recruiting duty. And I said yes.
And how long were you a recruiter then?
I was a recruiter from 1969 to 1974.
Okay. I want to continue down this path discussing the recruiting. There's some specific things I want to touch on, and we'll go back and talk about your other Vietnam experiences. So you're recruiting guys in Vietnam.
Yes.
You're recruiting guys 69, 70 and on
Yes.
in the U.S.
Yes.
Did you notice changes in the kind of people that were being brought in? And you had worked in processing as well. Trends of any kind.
As far as hostility,
Any sorts of things.
no,
Okay. What about the quality?
no.
Okay. Same general good and qualified?
As a recruiter and as a soldier and as an individual, I felt that it was my duty and honor to enlist the best of the best. And I would screen these people before I enlisted them. And as a reenlistment NCO in Vietnam, I felt the same way. As a NCO in Vietnam, I felt it was my duty to only retain individuals in my Army that I felt should be retained. And that if an individual was a derelict or if he was an undesirable, I frankly didn't have the time of day for him.
What would you consider derelict or undesirable?
The guy that was wanting the back door.
Okay.
The guy that was wanting the easy way out. To me, that's a derelict or an undesirable. Why should I put this man in the Army or keep this man in the Army if he's going to be an undesirable in another company or another platoon or maybe jeopardize another soldier? No, I wouldn't do it.
So on the flip side of that, what sort of positive attributes are you looking for?
Attitude,
What sort of attitude?
an attitude that a person wanted to serve his country, that he wanted to better himself, and that he was committed to his fellow man.
Why was it important to be committed to fellow man?
In a life and death situation, I felt it was extremely important.
Why?
If a person was in a life and death position, if that individual would stand up and be accounted for, that's the kind of soldier that I wanted standing next to me. I didn't want a guy that would run.
Somebody you could depend on?
Exactly.
Okay. How did, when you're doing these assessments, the incoming draftees, let's go back to Louisville, how did they respond to the assessments and the testing?
When I was at AFES, you know, these guys just took their test and we talked to them. We gave them an option to join the military or get drafted.
What was the advantage of joining?
Schooling.
Okay.
The Army is the largest school in the world as far as training goes. And I felt then, and I've always felt, that the Army offered the opportunity for any young man to further himself in life and gave him the foundation to go forward in life. And that was extremely important.
Okay. How long, in this process of going around and recruiting, how long were you in that task in Vietnam?
I was in that task for about, 3 months.
Okay.
And then Command Sergeant Major Vanderbilt had heard about me. And he was the division sergeant major. And asked if I would come down and be interviewed by General Keith Ware. And Major General Ware interviewed me personally and asked me if I wanted to take over a position with him as NCO IC of protocol.
Okay. Now, just so that we understand, and this is being taped, so sometimes I have to ask you to explain an acronym so that people who watch it later on know what we're saying. NCO stands for?
Non-commissioned officer, which I was a sergeant.
Okay, and IC stands for?
In charge.
Okay.
Protocol is arranging his schedule, taking care of things within division in his immediate office.
Okay.
And that's exactly what I did.
Now, the staff sergeant came to you and asked you to come down and be interviewed?
Command Sergeant Major.
Okay. Can you explain what the function of a command sergeant major,
The
please?
Command Sergeant Major's responsibility and function was that he was the Sergeant Major in charge of the whole entire division of all enlisted men.
So he's over all the
All.
enlisted men in the division.
In the division.
Who does he report to?
The general himself.
General Ware in this
Ware,
case, correct?
correct. That is correct.
Okay. So now you're going to be the NCO in charge.
Yes,
So you're dealing directly with General Ware.
directly with the general. Yes, I was.
Okay, and did you accept that position?
Yes, I did.
What was that like?
It was good. It was an honor. We became very close friends. The general one time was just joking around. He said, he says, Sergeant Hack, he says, do you know how to cut hair? And I says, no, I don't. He says, how would you like to learn? And I says, what do you mean? That's exactly what I said. I said, what do you mean? He says, how would you like to cut hair? He says, how would you like to cut my hair? And I says, wow, you know. And he says, I don't like this guy that comes around here. He says, I don't trust him. He says, I don't want this guy that close to me with scissors.
What kind of guy, was this an American or a Vietnamese?
No, he's a Vietnamese.
So he thought perhaps he was an infiltrated
He didn't know. He
or-
says, I don't trust him.
Okay, so how did you learn to cut the
Well,
general's hair?
The general brought in his aide, and I actually practiced on his aide.
What did the aide think about that?
Oh, that was funny. That was a riot.
The aide would have been what rank?
The aide was a first lieutenant, and I remember one time, well, at that time, you know, I'm cutting the aide's hair, and I got about halfway done, you know, and General Ware says, looks good to me, you're out of here. and this aide says, he says, Sergeant Hack isn't finished yet, you know, and the general says, I know, you're out of here.
So would you say the general was a man who had a pretty good sense of humor?
Oh, excellent. This guy was the greatest person in the world. You know, my father had just died, you know, and he had died, you know, a year prior to that. And Major General Ware, to me, was the next thing to my father. He was just super great. He was soft-spoken, easy, quiet, and did not get rattled at all. Never got rattled. People would come in there and they were rattled, different people. This guy didn't get rattled. He just one level, you know, straight. And it's just, the guy was neat.
Did you have opportunity to observe him in combat situations?
I did.
What was he like there?
Same thing. Level, cool-headed, had no problems at all, none. You know, would never want to play poker with him. You know, I'd lose. You know, the guy's good. Yeah, and he was just a real neat person. And I had a dog, and my dog was named Rebel, and he was a crazy dog. He was a mutt.
Where'd you get this dog?
He was given to me by Jack Biddix. And Rebel could hear a rocket coming or a mortar coming, and whenever you saw a Rebel heading for a bunker, man, you better go with him because the rocket's going to drop in your pocket. And Major General Ware had a dog, and his dog was King. And we talked about our dogs all the time. And what was neat was that he let me bring my dog down to headquarters. And,
Oh, you had the dog up in Lake
oh,
Cave?
yeah. Oh,
Okay.
he was there. Yeah.
Okay.
But he let me bring him down to General Ware's office. He let me bring my dog there, and King was there, so they got along great together. And but Rebel was quite a hoot. He really was. And,
How many dogs were there around?
Not a bunch, because the Vietnamese ate them.
Okay. Why do you suppose you guys liked having dogs?
I enjoyed the dog because he was a companion, and he saved my back, or protected my back, and he could hear rockets, he could smell Vietnamese, and he was really neat. He really was.
How did he respond when he smelled Vietnamese?
Went crazy. Absolutely went nuts. And I remember one time, and this was before I went to headquarters with the general. I was behind a rubber tree, and there was some problems.
Was this on one of the plantations?
This was close to Laike. And Rebel came up to me, and he slung mud all over me.
What do you mean he slung mud on you?
He was all muddy, and he slung it all over me. And I couldn't understand what the heck this crazy dog was doing. And what he wanted me to do is smell like the ground. I didn't put it together until later. He slung mud all over me. Got in mud and come over and slung it all over me.
Why would he want you to smell like the ground?
Because he didn't want the gooks, the VC, to smell me. And I didn't put that together until later. I says, wow, because we were in a combat position, and VC could smell you. And
Now I've heard some other combat veterans tell me that they could smell VC.
You can smell them too. You better believe it. They can smell you, both.
So there's some kind of different smell between
Right.
the Asians and the Caucasians.
Right. There is
Or the Americans.
a different smell.
Okay.
You don't wear aftershave lotion. There's a lot of things you don't do. But Rebel slung mud all over me, and I know that's the reason that he did it. And then when I was in the hospital, a guy came in from Laike, and I asked him, I says, did you hear about my dog, Rebel? And this guy says, yeah. He says, your dog is still running around. I says, wow.
So somebody else took care of your dog
Right.
after you were gone?
Right.
Okay.
That was really neat. If you go to my website, I have a picture of Rebel,
What's your website?
uswings.com.
Okay.
And it's got a picture of Rebel there.
Okay.
And he was just a mutt,
Okay.
but a smart mutt.
Now, we were talking a little bit about General Ware before
Right.
we got on
Yeah,
the Rebel.
I'm sorry.
That's fine.
Yeah,
No, that's
yeah,
great. Great
yeah,
stuff.
Yeah.
And he had King.
Mm-hmm.
How long were you with General Ware?
3 months.
General Ware died in Vietnam. Is
He
that
did.
correct? What were the circumstances of that?
Friday the 13th, the general was involved in coordinating a battle around Loc Ninh, An, and he flew up to coordinate the battle on a Huey. I was supposed to go with him. I was supposed to be on the helicopter with him. And Command Sergeant Major Vanderbilt was on the helicopter with him. The first lieutenant, his aide, came up to me, and said that I had to stand down, that he was going to take my place on the Huey helicopter. And I told the first lieutenant, I says, Lieutenant, I said, the general wants me to go with him. And the lieutenant says, I'm giving you a direct order. You meet us up there. And I says, wow. So I acknowledged it. I said, yes, sir. And I did. I stood down.
Do you remember that first lieutenant's name?
I don't remember his first name. his name. He's on Keith Ware's website, and Major General Ware, his website. The lieutenant, of course, was killed at the same time because they received a direct hit by an RPG round. The helicopter exploded. in midair, and everyone aboard, its name's on the wall.
How did you find out?
I had gone up on a track, and we had received contact, and I was on top of a track and was blown off by an RPG round. I think it was an RPG round. And,
What's a track?
Armored personnel carrier.
Okay.
And I heard about it when I was in the hospital.
So at the same time, you're traveling up and you're under attack and
Right.
you're wounded.
Right.
General Ware's helicopter goes down.
His helicopter was blown up in the air, yes.
Okay. And General Ware, nobody on the helicopter survived.
There was no survivors, no.
Okay.
He had King on the helicopter, too, his dog.
Before we go back and talk about
Mhm.
your experience there in the battle and being wounded,
Mhm.
how did that affect the division?
It was devastating, I'm sure, because we talked about it later. Everyone loved Keith Ware. You know, they respected him, but there was a tremendous amount of affection there. The guy was a man's man. It was just very, very, very nice.
How did he treat his troops?
Superb, absolutely superb.
In what respects?
I'd heard him say this more times than one. I put my pants on the same way as you, one leg at a time. And that was a favorite expression of his. And you know, he was a humble person, very sincere, very honest, and devoted, you know, to his profession, and devoted to his country. I remember one night he told me, and I quote, he says, "Sergeant Hack, if they gave me the okay," he says, "I could end this."
In the Vietnam War.
He could end this.
What was his thinking on that?
I'm sure it would probably be the Vietnam War, because, you know, he was there at Saigon.
I mean, how did he think he could end the war?
By, you know, just going in and doing what he had to do. You know, but he, like every other person over there, had to follow orders.
Was there a sense that he felt hamstrung somehow?
From that night when we were talking, I felt that he wanted to do more than what he could do.
Do you think he was frustrated?
No, I just think that he could do more than what he was doing, and he felt like that he could. You know, the president was giving the orders, was calling the shots. General William C. Westmoreland was pulling the strings too, was giving the shots. You know, General Westmoreland came up to like a lot, and so I don't think that Westmoreland himself, you know, felt any different than what Major General Ware felt.
Did you meet General Westmoreland?
I did.
What was your impression of him?
He was a soldier.
In what respects?
He was very, very, very straightforward. And I sat in, not but 5 feet away from him, 4 feet away from him, when he was talking to Major General Ware. He was a soldier. He was a very, very strong individual, and he was a true professional.
How did he treat his men?
I didn't serve with him, so I don't know. Okay. I know he drove my Jeep when he retired. I do know that. My Jeep was taken out of the museum, and he drove it for his retirement.
Oh.
Yep. I found that out later.
Okay, let's go back now. General Ware has taken off.
Mm-hmm.
You go and hop on an armored personnel carrier.
Yes.
And you're headed up, what, 13?
Yes.
To go to?
Anlock, Quanloy, not Quanloy, but Anlock and Loch Nyan, up in that direction.
Okay. And you're headed up Route 13.
Mm-hmm.
How far did you make it before you came under attack?
A few hours.
What was that like?
There was a lot of noise, a lot of excitement, and you know, everybody was scared. I was knocked off the track, knocked unconscious, and I woke up in a hospital at Long Binh. They stabilized me in Long Binh and then sent me to Japan. I was at the 106 hospital in Japan for 30 days. They stabilized me there and then sent me to Fort Knox and stayed there a year. At Fort Knox, at Ireland Army Hospital, they treated me like a king, and it was phenomenal. It really was. They was sending me to Womack General Hospital at Fort Bragg, and the planes landed in Alaska. Then from Alaska to Andrews Air Force Base outside of Washington, D.C. Full-bird colonel came aboard the plane, and he said, "This patient plane, you know, a hospital plane." And he says, "Does anyone have any questions or problems?" And I raised my hand. And I says, "I do." And he says, "What is your question?" And I says, "Well, the Army's policy was for long-term patients to be stationed close to home." I said, "My home's Louisville, Kentucky. Fort Knox is 20 miles away. They're sending me to Womack. That's over 1,000 miles away." The colonel says, "You're absolutely correct." And he told the doctor in charge of the patients there to take me off. They took me off the hospital plane, put me in a hospital at Andrews Air Force Base, brought in another plane, and took me to Fort Knox. And that was a major shot in the arm, because when I landed at Fort Knox, my mother was there, and my wife was there, and the ambulance was there, and Major Barnes was the hospital commander. He says, "Welcome home."
What were the nature of your injuries?
The biggest thing was my right leg.
What had happened?
A direct hit, shrapnel maybe. It blew off my right leg, kneecap. I don't have a joint there at all. And there's no cartilage, there's no meniscus, there's no kneecap, and it's been gone.
You have an artificial kneecap there?
Nothing at all.
Nothing at all.
Just muscle.
Okay. That was not your first wound, was it?
No.
When were you wounded previous to that?
April the 10th, my left side. I lost a couple ribs.
How did that happen?
I think it was a 122 rocket, 122 millimeter or 107. It hit me in the side, it hit me in my face, in my head, and in my nose.
I take it you were in combat somewhere.
I was.
Tell me about that, if you would.
There again, I was out there, you know, getting people to sign up. And just at the wrong place at the wrong time.
Where were you? Do you remember?
Outside of Like K.
Okay, so you're at Like K at a fire base, doing your recruiting thing.
You bet.
What happened?
A whole bunch of incoming, you know, just rockets coming in.
So how do you respond as the recruiter guy who's there and you're not assigned to a squad or anything?
You just do your best, yeah.
You're armed?
Yes.
Okay.
I used to carry a quick draw holster, which was a .45, and then when I first went, I had a M14, and then we switched over to the M16. But I had an M14 in April the 10th, and those things are pretty heavy. But that's what I had, yes. But I was always armed, and carried the .45 constantly. He just, that's the first thing that I got a hold of was a .45.
What do you remember about that combat experience prior to your wound?
Just a bunch of, noise, a bunch of, stuff coming in, rockets exploding, and people screaming, The guy standing next to me was killed.
What did you think when that happened?
Everything was very fast,
Was he a recruiter also, or
No.
was he?
No, there's only two reenlistment NCOs, myself and a guy named Quam.
Okay, the guy standing next to you, why is he standing next to you?
I was talking to him.
About reenlisting?
Right.
Do you ever think back on that?
Thought about it.
That man? What
Sure.
have you thought?
It has to be a reason for me being here.
How long after that were you wounded? Or were you wounded as a result? Was
I
he
was-
killed at the same time you were wounded?
We were both, hurt. He died, and I lived.
Now, explain again your injuries in that.
My side from shrapnel in my face,
Okay.
this right here, and then my nose, and then I had a scar over here.
What kind of treatment did you receive medically?
There was a hospital at K.
A field hospital?
Mm-hmm.
Well, what do you remember about the medic?
The medic's
Anything?
name was Vaughn,
Okay.
and neat guy. He chewed tobacco. Was about 5'7", round body, big shoulders. Nice, a real nice guy.
Have you ever seen him since? You ever
No.
seen him?
The only person that I have spoken to since Vietnam was Jack Biddix. Jack Biddix is in South Carolina, if he's still alive. I talked to him about a year ago, and Jack's health was failing. And he called me. He says, I saw your name on the internet. And he says, I figured you'd be dead by now. And I says, no, I'm still around, Jack. And he says,
How did you know Jack Biddix?
Jack is the person that I relieved, and he owned or had the dog Rebel.
Okay.
And neat guy, Southern boy, just a real nice laid-back guy. And we were supposed to hook up, and I told him, I says, here I am. I says, if you ever want to come up, let me know, and I'll buy an airplane ticket for you and fly you up. And he says his health is failing, and he said that when he got to feeling better, he'd let me know. And he hasn't called me back, so I don't know if Jack died or if he's still alive.
Let's go back to the incident there at K.
Okay.
The medic, what's he do to treat you?
It wasn't major stuff. This scar here wasn't major, It's just a few stitches. You flap it back down, you sew yourself up. My nose, I got broken. It's no big thing. One nostril I can't breathe out of now, and that's no big thing.
What happened with your ribs?
Busted 3 of them.
Broken ribs?
Broken, and shrapnel hit it and tore it up a little bit. They just sewed it up, and away you go.
Did they evacuate you?
No.
What'd you do about the cracked ribs?
Just taped up, and the wound taped up, and you just do the best you can. A lot of guys didn't get, medevaced out. It was up to the doctor to evaluate you and say, stay or you go.
Okay.
And to tell you the truth, it wasn't major.
Okay.
The guys that was in the body bags, that was major.
The guy who was standing next to you?
Exactly, and other people. That's major. There was a lot of guys that got hurt in Vietnam that continued to do the job and went forward.
Why do you suppose that is?
I think it's called dedication.
Why did you go forward?
Dedication. I felt then that it was my job, and I still feel that way. I absolutely positively have no regrets whatsoever about serving in Vietnam, serving my country, and being where I am today, you know.
As you reflect back, what's your overall impression of that experience?
I know that we as a nation, as a country, should be proud of our existence, proud of our heritage, and proud to be an American. And not all people have had the honor to serve their country. I felt that it was an honor for me to serve my country, and I still feel that way. And, you know, that goes all the way back to 1776, you know. I feel that it's an honor, and I'm not naive enough to believe that everything's roses, that things happen. But, you know, without the armed forces, we would not enjoy the life that we have today. And I firmly believe that.
What, in retrospect, what are your impressions of the 1st Division?
That runs parallel with my beliefs.
Okay. Let's go back. You get shot off the track. You were unconscious.
Right.
So do you remember being evacuated? Or?
No.
Okay. When do you first wake up?
I woke up watching Lloyd Bridges on TV speaking Japanese.
In Japan?
In Japan.
What was that like?
It was a buzz. I'm serious. It was a buzz, because I did not have a clue. And here I look up, and here's Lloyd Bridges. Also, same mistake. I says, whoa, that was a hoot.
Was this Lloyd Bridges when he was the scuba diving?
Yeah, and
Okay.
that blew my mind. And then after that, the other guys that was there on the ward were all talking, you know, and this one guy says, what happened to you? And this other guy says, what happened to you? So everybody's comparing notes, you know. And this one guy says, well, this guy had bullet holes all through him. I mean, man, he looked like Swiss cheese. And I asked him, I says, what happened to you? And he said that he had a point man that was nervous on the point. And he hollered at him to tell him to go the other way. And he spun around and sprayed him. I says, what? And yeah, he spun around.
So he got friendly fire right at point blank range
Right there.
from his own point man.
Yeah, from his point man. And then this other guy's talking to him. This guy was in traction. His legs were spread out, his arms were spread out. And I says, what happened to you? And he says, I jumped out of the helicopter. I says, okay. He says, but what happened was that it wasn't daylight yet. He says, everybody's taking their time jumping out of that side. He says, I jumped out of that side. He says, guess what? We were on a mountaintop. And I went, yo, straight down. I says, oh, man. So, it's, you know, things like that. And it was different. It really was different just talking to these guys, you know. And people just laughing and carrying on and in major pain, but telling you different stories of what happened to them and how things happened to them. And it really helped. It really did.
How did you feel at that time? Aside from the pain, what was your emotional condition?
I think that I, like everyone else, was probably in shock, you know, because you don't know. You really don't. You know, number one is that you're doped up with Demerol, and then when you come out of it, you know, you're still in a daze. You're still in a shock. I really didn't feel, you know, totally together until I was stateside back in the hospital, and all of us guys were running up and down in wheelchairs on the ward, you know, joking around and talking. And then it sort of hit us all.
Did you ever have a sense of relief?
That I made it and some others didn't?
Yes.
I think that a lot of us guys felt that, why? You know what I mean?
Why did I make it? When did that start to sink in? Take your time.
I honestly think that that's a question that we all ask.
Do you find that when you get together with old buddies from Vietnam, that that's a prevalent kind of a question?
No,
Okay. You're saying this based on your experience.
right. I really, sincerely don't associate with a lot of Vietnam vets.
Is there a reason for that?
Well, part of the reason is that I think that, oh gee whiz, maybe 50% or more of the people say they're Vietnam vets were not Vietnam vets. Really. And you don't want to get into a confrontation with them where they say, well, I was in Vietnam and I was doing this, man, and I was doing that. I had guys tell me about Cameron Bay and how they got invaded and how they got ran over and all this other stuff, and it's all a bunch of BS. And sometimes a guy would tell you different things that you know that's a downright lie, and you don't want to get into a confrontation with him.
How do you feel about that?
Well, you feel like smacking him. You really do.
So the prudent thing is to not talk to him.
Exactly. The prudent thing is just to walk away from it. I had a guy once came in my store and was telling me he was collecting money for Vietnam vets. And I said to him, I says, what are you going to do with the money? Vietnam vets are not on charity. You know, what are you going to do with the money? And it was all a bunch of BS. And I hate that. I hate that when people say that I'm collecting money for Vietnam vets, because a Vietnam vet is not a charity case. And that kind of stuff bothers me. I hate to go to a store and see these guys collecting out front for Vietnam vets, because that's all a bunch of BS. You know, a person that had served his country in Vietnam is no better or no worse than a person who serves his country today. It's the same.
Do you think there's a stereotype associated with Vietnam vets?
I think there is, yeah. You know, I think that a lot of people think that Vietnam vets carries over from 30, 40 years ago, that some of them are wackos, which is wrong, which is really wrong. I think that if you take and you look at that most of the people that have survived Vietnam are very successful in their families. They're very successful in their community. They're very successful within their church. I think that we're the type of individuals that have been there and have done that, but we're no better or no worse than anyone else. We're Americans that have served our country and that are doing the best that we can. And that's how I see it. And but that's why I don't get into a lot of conversations with guys that claim they were in Vietnam.
I've gone to a couple rallies, and I've been around these guys at some of the rallies, and a lot of the guys that are in the rallies are not Vietnam vets. I have a Purple Heart license plate, and the individual in charge of the Purple Heart license plate in Ohio, I was talking to him one day about it, and he says, you'd be surprised at how many people claim they have the Purple Heart that don't have it. And I said, why would a person want to do that for? I'm a Mason. I'm a 32nd degree Mason. I'm a Shriner. And we talk about that. How many people that claim they're Masons that are not Masons? Why would you want to do that? So I guess the bottom line is that you know, that in my business, a guy comes to me and says he's a Vietnam vet, I can tell right off the bat then he's in my backyard. But I don't want a bunch of BS. We don't talk about war stories, you know. And
Let me take you back, sort of chronologically. How long are you in Japan?
about 30 days.
30 days, and then they flew you to Washington and take you back to
Fort Knox, yeah.
Kentucky. How long were you in Fort Knox?
A year.
Do you have rehab?
I had 5 major surgeries
On your knee and
on my leg. They wanted to cut it off. I wouldn't allow that. I wouldn't sign. They wanted to fuse it, and I wouldn't let them fuse it either. And the rest of it was rehab. When I was a recruiter, for a long time I wore a metal brace, and I stayed on medical hold all the time I was a recruiter.
medical hold.
Meaning I had a 4 profile, and it's a medical hold. I go back and forth in the hospital.
So there were times when you left your recruiting duties to go back in for further treatment?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. Why don't we cut there and take the next tape?
Okay.
Come back to another tape here. He'll have to rewind that and take a second if you want some water.
I'll take water. But I'm sorry about that because
No, that is absolutely.
that's just,
You guys are wired up. I'll go get some water in the little kitchen there.
Yeah.
yeah, a cup
All right, very good.
of ice and stuff.
You want to refill on your water, Steve?
I'm pretty good, thank you.
But I think a lot of guys ask that question.
Why me?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
They-
my father's Purple Heart pays for me doing this now as a student.
Really?
In Indiana, we didn't know this the first time I went through college.
Mm-hmm.
In Indiana, if your father or mother has a Purple Heart recipient, you can go to state school for free.
I know.
You can't, we didn't know that. We'd have had a lot cheaper education had we known.
Right. Well,
I told Dad that, and he said, can I go back and recover
Yeah.
what I paid for to Ball
And-
State for your brothers?
in Virginia, the state of Virginia, for recipients of the Purple Heart, their children go to school free. I think it's Virginia, or no, I'm sorry, South Carolina. Thank you, sir.
I'm
And
going to step out and wait for the next one.
Okay.
Take your time.
Yeah,
You got
and it's
half
free.
an hour
Yeah.
anyway, but I'm going to wait for the other guy to make sure I will.
out of Ohio, I have a second marriage. I have a daughter that is 18, and I have a son that's 14. I have another daughter that's 9, and I do that for a reason. Yeah.
I'm thinking selling some of the product you guys sell. You must have, not infrequently, some of these people who want to come up and talk about the war or
I have a
fake
lot
like
of
it.
people. Some heavyweight people, real heavyweights. But the people that I help are like, I take care of one village in India completely. I take care of families completely. At Christmas time, I make sure that that a lot of kids are happy. There's a lot of things that we do, my wife and I do, to help, people have a better life. And that's important.
That's a sense of gratitude for.
You chop a tree, you plant two. And that's important. That's how I believe. That's why I'm very active with Masonic Lodge and the Shriners. We have a thing in the Shrine that the children that come to our hospitals, they leave their insurance cards at home. We don't take insurance.
Yeah, at the Shrine. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm extremely active, doing that.
You ready to go? Okay. It's Steve Brown. It is still July 16th, Wednesday, July 16th, 2008, and I am in Hudson, Ohio, with Mr. David Hack, and we're in the offices of his company, U.S. Wings, and this would be the second tape of this interview. Mr. Hack, we were talking about the experience you had a little bit in terms of your recuperation and recovery from these pretty significant wounds you received as a result of rocket-propelled grenade knocking you off of an APC at or about the same time your commanding general was going down in a helicopter. You're back in Louisville. At that point, how much time did you have left on your enlistment?
I had re-enlisted, when I came back from Vietnam.
Okay. At Fort Knox, I'm sorry.
I don't believe I re-enlisted at Fort Knox. I think I re-enlisted when I was on recruiting duty.
Okay. How long were you on recruiting duty?
4 years.
Okay. And how long did you re-enlist? Of that time period, how much was your re-enlistment?
I re-enlisted for 6 years.
Okay. And when did you complete? Let me ask you a question.
Mm-hmm.
Did you notice any change in the type of people you were taking in as a recruiter?
No.
During that time period?
No.
Did the Army take any different measures as Vietnam wore on? You would have shifted to an all-volunteer Army. Were you aware of any measures that the Army may have taken to improve on the quality of recruits in terms of drug and alcohol addiction, education, things like that?
USAREC sent down information as far as our qualifications go. And we didn't have any standards, any different standards. The standards at that time, I felt, were always high. The education had to be there. No records had to be there. Convictions, traffic violations, DWI was out of the question, reckless op out of the question. So I think everything was about the same.
Were you getting high school graduates?
Yes.
Okay. Consistently?
Consistently.
Okay.
Now, as a recruiter, I was a top recruiter in the nation for 4 straight years. And that's a matter of record with USAREC. As a matter of fact, the commanding general of USAREC and I had lunch a year ago. He flew in here, and he and I met and had a lunch together. Bostic is his name, Major General. And my record then was 20 men per month, 12 months out of the year. Today, a recruiter, I think, only has to recruit 2 men a month. That's about it. And I told the General, I says, when I was a recruiter, the hardest thing in the world to sell was a person's life. And he looked at me and he says, Sergeant Hack, you're right. And I says, yes, think about that. Whenever I put a person in the Army, it was his life. And it's a big difference.
When you were back, you're on your duty, you're recruiting. Were there any difficulties that you experienced, nightmares, night sweats?
Sweats constantly. I would wake up in the middle of the night and my chest, the chest cavity would be full of water. And it was extremely embarrassing because the bed that I was laying in was soaking wet. And I'd have to get up and change the sheets and get back in bed and take a beach towel and put the beach towel in the bed and sleep on that because I knew it was going to happen again before the evening would pass. And that was difficult. And that, to this day, still happens. And it's embarrassing. It really is. When you're laying in bed and you wake up and you're soaking wet. And but that bothers me.
Why do you think that happened?
I have no idea.
Okay. Did that happen before you were in Vietnam?
No. No, I'm sure it was from Vietnam. There was some things that happened in Vietnam. I have TB now, and it's not contagious, but I flunked the blood test. Yeah, the knot pops up on the arm. That is there. I have glaucoma. That's there.
Do you think you contracted the tuberculosis in Vietnam?
Vietnam, right. And I have retinal vein problems. I'm blind in my right eye. I can't see.
When did that happen?
Through the years.
Okay.
You know, I go to Cleveland Clinic every 3 months. See a Dr. Shackett there.
Do you experience hearing loss?
Hearing loss, I have that problem. Have ringing in my ears. I take a pill for that. Actually, it's a vitamin pill for ringing in the ear. I've gone to the best ear doctors in the world, and there's nothing you can do about it.
I'm assuming you got a disability rating from the VA.
Not from the VA, from the Army.
Okay.
I wouldn't take the VA.
Okay.
The way it is with the Army and the VA is you have to sign off all your rights as being in the Army, receiving an Army pension if you go with VA. I wouldn't do that.
So you were entitled because of your service in the Coast Guard and in the Army. How many years did you have in altogether?
13 and a half, 14.
Okay.
But I'm retired Army.
Okay.
I have the retired ID card, and I have the retired benefits, and I have all my retired rights. If I went with VA, I'd have to forfeit that.
Okay.
And I don't want to do that. I have the same benefits as a person that spent 20 years. Same identical. My wife has her ID card. Children have their ID card, everything.
And that's associated because of your wounds?
Combat incurred wounds, correct.
Okay. Okay. You ever have problems with cars backfiring or
Yes.
loud noises? Can you
Yes.
tell me about that?
Can't stand to be around it. I can't stand to be around a restaurant that has balloons. I leave. I get up and leave. Cannot.
Why the balloons?
Because they make noise when they pop.
They pop.
And then they drives me crazy.
You ever have any incidents where something went off and you hit the deck?
You betcha.
How long did that go on?
It still does. You know, I don't go in restaurants that have balloons
For that reason?
for that reason. Yeah. I tell my wife, we got to go. 4th of July, I do not get involved in it. And there's a lot of things that I've learned to cope with and understand and work around. And that happens to be some of them.
What else?
I don't like to be around belligerent people. I don't like to be around loud people. I don't like arguments. I don't like any confrontation whatsoever. Don't even part of it.
What happens if you get around somebody who's belligerent, or there's an argument, or what's your reaction?
I have to walk away from it.
If you did not walk away, how would you start to feel?
I get tensed, you know. But as a person that has been around a lot of people, I know how to handle my situation. I know that there's a problem and I have to avoid it, and I have to slow down and calm down. I don't suffer from PSD, but I just know that there are issues there that I have to understand.
When did you begin to learn about that, figure that out?
Oh, I think while I was on recruiting duty that I knew that there was problems.
What did you do about that?
Worked them out myself.
Okay.
I most certainly didn't want to sit down with a doctor and say, hey, you know, this is what's going on, because I doubt that the doctor would understand, you know. And you most certainly can't sit down with someone else and say, hey, this is what's going on, because they wouldn't understand either. You have to work it out yourself. And I worked it out myself.
In talking to a number of veterans over the last couple months, it's been my experience that many times they're sitting and they get done talking and they say, this is the first time I have ever talked at any length about my military experience and my Vietnam experience. Is that the case with you?
At 3 o'clock this morning, I woke my wife up. And I told her, I says, you know, I don't know, how I feel about tomorrow. And she said, well, it's your decision. So does that answer your question?
If that was that intimidating for you, I've got to think that this is a unique event for you.
Well, it most certainly is.
Okay.
So, that's how I felt. By the way, I did not go back to sleep.
Is there something that I haven't touched on, something you'd like to talk about, something you'd like to share that we need to be sure we talk about?
I think, in all honesty, that Vietnam veterans got the short end of the stick.
Why do you think that?
I was in Florida, and when I was down there, I was there 7 years.
When was this?
This was 20 years ago.
So about 1988?
Yeah, 20 years ago is when I came back to the United States, when I came back to Ohio. But prior to that, I was there 7 years. And I was in Fort Myers, and a bunch of guys came up to me, and they says, and they knew I was a Vietnam vet, and they says, we're having a rally for Desert Storm and Vietnam veterans. We'd like for you to participate. And I says, wow, you're a day late and a dollar short.
I, on my website, sell T-shirts at my cost that says welcome home. And I give out bumper stickers free that say welcome home. And I sell caps on my website that says welcome home. Cost, sometimes below cost. And I think that Vietnam veterans deserve everything underneath this sun for what they've done in Vietnam as far as contributing and being a soldier and serving their country. They're no better, no worse than anyone else, but I think that they never received the recognition that they should have received. Not one time. And you look around now and you see these guys, and I'm not, saying, wow, why not me? But you look around and you see this today, and it's not the soldier, it's the civilians. And as far as the animosity that we received, and we received a lot. There was a bonus that was given out by people that were Vietnam veterans by the state of Kentucky. I wouldn't accept it.
Why not?
Because I felt that they were a day late and a dollar short. That's how I felt. And I still feel that way,
How did you experience the animosity that you're speaking about?
I think that some people, not all people, but some people look down on Vietnam veterans, that they were less of a person. And that's something that they're sadly mistaken.
Does that go back to the stereotype that you were describing earlier?
Yes, I think it does.
Everybody's a Rambo kind of a person?
Right. And I think that's wrong. It's totally wrong, because everyone wanted to do what they had to do. And everyone wanted to survive. And everyone was the same. And there's another thing about it. When I said there's no atheists in foxholes, that I believe that everyone is created equal. Everyone. And when you have a distinction, then there's a problem there.
And you feel some people are making that distinction for...
I felt they did. In my particular lifestyle now, they don't. Very, very few people, even question it. I think that I've been a leader in my community, a leader in my church, a leader in Masonic Lodge, and I've tried to lead an example in my business of this is what normal people are, and this is how it is, and that we're no better or no worse. But don't come up to me later and say, this is what we like to do for you. I don't want to hear it. I really don't. I think it's called pride.
Well, Sergeant Hack, on behalf of Ball State University and Cantigny 1st Division Oral History Project and myself and my family, I'd like to thank you for your service.
Thank you. So this guy has come in from, was with the 1st?